Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Burrell Brown, Professor of Business and Director of the Frederick Douglass Institute. I have the coveted honor of welcoming you to California and this program in particular. As Director of the Institute, whose primary purpose is the institutionalization of diversity among the California University faculty, I have developed a greeting which I would like to share with you on this evening, and it goes something like this. To those of you that are Christians, I bring you greetings in the tradition of the great Apostle Paul. Peace be unto you, my brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. To those of you who are descendants of the great prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, followers of the Star of David, I bring you greetings in the tradition of the rabbis of old, Shalom. To those of you who are followers of the great prophet Muhammad, students of the Quran, I bring you greetings in the tradition of the great Imams. Assalamu alaikum. For those of you who are believers in the Federation, I bring you greetings from the planet Vulcan in the tradition of our great ambassador, Spock. Live long and prosper. And for those of you who are not quite sure what you believe in, I bring you greetings in the tradition of the street. What's up? Let me tell you a little of the role of the Frederick Douglass Institute here at California. We are divided into 3 active subcommittees. One which sponsors events like this. In the past, we have been honored with people like Kwesi Mfume and Coretta Scott King, and now are extremely honored to have Miss Donna Brazile with us. We also sponsor a Frederick Douglass Scholars. This is an ABD candidate who provides the ideas of Frederick Douglass and will teach here at California, while at the same time wrapping up his or her PhD. And of course, we sponsor the Martin Luther King Scholarships, which will be presented later on this evening. Finally, we sponsor workshops, which integrate the goals and ideals of Frederick Douglass into the curriculum. I get the honor of standing up here and taking all of the accolades for the Frederick Douglass Institute, but of course it could not happen without the hard work of the committee. I would ask that all of those who are members of the Frederick Douglass Institute please stand and take their appropriate round of applause. FDI members, come on, I know y'all out there. Hospitals. I want to especially acknowledge the hard work of Lenora Angelone, Dr. Melanie Blum, Dr. Muhammad Yamba, Ms. Maureen Pugh, and of course my co-director, Dean Jerry Jones, for their hard work in putting this program together. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the administration for their support of the institution. In times like these, which are financially difficult for all institutions of higher learning, it would be extremely easy for the Institute to simply say, we cannot continue to support activities like FDI. But even in the face of these difficult economic times, our administration has continued to support FDI, and I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank them. For students and guests who have not registered to vote, now, y'all don't tell me who you are, but quietly, at the end of this program, there will be a voter registration table, and you can sign up. That table will be located outside of the Performance Center. There's also information about the new university's leadership program. To all of I want to introduce our distinguished provost, who will do the introduction of our guest speaker, Dr. Curtis Smith.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. And welcome, everyone. I think it says something very good about University that we have this crowd up against a basketball championship game. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Donna Brazile to you this evening. Ms. Brazile, National Institute. The VRI was established in 2001 to help protect and promote Americans to participate in the political process. Ms. Brazile is the former campaign manager of the Gore-Lieberman 2000 campaign, and she is the first African-American woman to lead a major presidential campaign. A veteran Democratic political strategist, Ms. Brazile serves as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She is a weekly contributor and political commentator on CNN's Inside Politics in American Morning, a columnist for Roll Call newspaper, and she appears regularly on MSNBC's Hardball and Fox's Hannity and Colmes. Prior to joining the Gore campaign, Ms. Brazile was Chief of Staff and Press Secretary to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia, where she helped guide the district's budget and local legislation on Capitol Hill. During the 2002 midterm election, Ms. Brazile traveled to more than 29 states and 53 congressional districts to help train Democratic activists. At the conclusion of the 2002 midterm elections, Ms. Brazile served as a media consultant and grassroots organizer for Senator Mary Landrieu. Ms. Brazile served as student coordinator of the Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday Committee, and she was appointed to serve as the National Mobilization Director of the 20th anniversary commemoration of the historic March on Washington. She also served as the Regional Director for Hands Across America and was the National Coordinator of Housing Now. Ms. Brazile was founder and executive director of the National Political Congress of Black Women. Ms. Brazile has worked on several presidential campaigns for Democratic candidates, including Carter Mondale in 1976 and 1980, Reverend Jesse Jackson's first historic bid for the presidency in 1984, Mondale Ferrero in 1984, U.S. Representative Dick Gephardt in 1988, Dukakis Benson in 1988, and Clinton Gore in 1992 and 1996. Additionally, she has served as a senior lecturer and adjunct professor at the University of Maryland and a fellow of Harvard's Institute of Politics. Ms. Brazile is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including Washingtonian Magazine's 100 Most Powerful Women in Washington, D.C., Essence Magazine's 50 Most Powerful Women in America, and the Congressional Black Caucus's Foundation Award for Political Achievement. A native of New Orleans, Louisiana, Ms. Brazile earned her undergraduate degree from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. Currently, she is founder and managing director of Brazile and Associates, a political consulting and grassroots advocacy firm based in the District of Columbia. Folks, you have a treat ahead. It's my honor to welcome Donna Brazile.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Smith, for that gracious introduction. And I promise next time I'm on the Charles, I'm going to go and look in the yearbook and check out all your vitals. I also told Dr. Smith that I was interested in reading some of his reference books. Of course, he's a former English professor, and since I hail from Louisiana and I just before I was 2 years old, I just want to get it right before I go. So thank you so much. I was just home recently for Mardi Gras. You know, Louisianians have 4 seasons. We start off the year with Mardi Gras season, of course, and we all celebrate and prepare for Lent. Pretty soon, right before Easter, we'll get into crawfish season because, as you well know, we got to make our etouffee. And then after crawfish season, we go into shrimp season. We like our shrimp fried, stewed, barbecued, and practically any other way you like it. And then, of course, right before the election in 231 days, we'll go into crab season so that we can have our seafood gumbo. We can also have our muffaladas and jambalaya and all of our other boudin and andouille sausage type of dishes. So Louisianians are special people. I'm a Lady Tiger. I'm proud of my alma mater. We won the national championship, of course, in football, and tonight I'm a Lady Vulcan. And I just want to let you all know, thank you so much, that in my years of growing up, I was one of the first female athletes of Title IX. I played at LSU. I was also on the track team, and we just won our Section I was Southeast Conference this past weekend, the track team. I threw the shot putting the disc because I had a nice arm on me. You know, when you grow up by the Mississippi River and you just want to hit the other side of the river, no one told me how wide the Mississippi was. So all my life, I just kept throwing those rocks, never made it quite over. But years later, when I got on the airplane, I felt like I finally crossed over that river. My friends, I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about a topic that I care deeply about. I got involved in politics when I was a young girl. It was the night after Dr. King was assassinated, back on April 5th, 1968. I'm one of 9 children, and my mom, of course, being a good Catholic mother, wanted us to stay inside and pray. My father lit a candle. We were all sad. We mourned the death of Dr. King. And that night, one of my friends, Jeff, said that his parents were going to attend a vigil at one of the local Baptist church. And during those days, Catholics, I don't know about Baptists, but because we were Catholic, we were not allowed to go to Baptist churches. They said because they kept you in all the time. And so I wanted to go. And my mother warned us that we could not go. There was a lot of rumors, of course, that there would be violence. And she was afraid that somebody could, you know, get hurt. So she told us to stay in, and I thought about it, and I really wanted to go. So I went up to my room, and I climbed out the back window, and I went with Jeff down the train tracks to Webster Street. And right there at Little Providence Baptist Church, they had a little vigil. And I'll never forget, now I disobeyed my mother. I climbed out that window. And it was one of the first, last, and only times I ever disobeyed my mother. But I didn't go inside the church. I stayed out, and I listened to the choir saying, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine." I ran back home. I didn't want to stay long. But once that song was over with, I had my call. I had my call. And I got home, and my mother was right there at the back door. She grabbed me. I didn't have much hair then, so she didn't have to grab me by a ponytail, you know. She just pulled me in the house, and she said, "Go get that switch off the weeping willow tree." That meant big business. Back today, they call it child abuse, but back then it was called discipline. Went got that switch, and of course, I got a nice whipping. And I went up to my room. I shared a room with my older sister, and I cried, and I said to Cheryl, I said, "But it was worth it. I got a little light. I got a little light." Next morning, I got up, and I noticed that some of the little wounds had healed. I told all of my little brothers and sisters that I had a little light. They had a little light. And that Dr. King gave us all a little light. I didn't know what I was talking about. But Rosemary Minor knew what Dr. King had stood for and his dream. And that year in Kenner, Louisiana, before my city was even incorporated as a town, nowadays people call it a suburban area, but back then it was just Kenner, the back door of New Orleans. You had to fly into Kenner over the swamps and the river in order to get to the Crescent City. That's where Wynton Marsalis and all those great jazz musicians are from, but nobody want to tell you they're from Kenner. I'm from Kenner. And Ms. Minor decided to begin voter registration like you're doing here tonight. And because I was really good, I was in 3rd grade, Ms. Pierce had taught me how to, of course, write. "I will not talk in class, I will not talk in class, I will not talk in class." I could do that 500 times in 10 minutes. That was my homework most nights. And she said, Ms. Minor said, "Well, if you go down the street and you talk to Ms. O.C. and you talk to Mr. Jumel and you talk to Ms. Rita and Mr. Bobby, just find out they're registered to vote." So I would write down Ms. O.C. and then I would put no. Write down Mr. Jumel, yes. By the end of the day, I would accumulate 12, 15 names, because you know Louisiana people, when you stop by to say hello, they want to cook something for you. So I had a lot of meals along the way. But when I finished up my day, Ms. Minor would look at the list, and she would separate those who were registered and those who needed registration forms, and I went back. When I brought the forms back, I got a nickel per name. Now, people say, "You got a nickel for doing voter registration?" Look, in Louisiana with the humidity and the hot temperatures, I needed that money to buy myself a frozen cup or a snow cone. And also, I had to hire some other people because it was really an interesting prospect. A lot of people were not registered to vote. And I talked to them about Martin Luther King and his life. And I told them they had a little light. And the only way that their light could shine if they went out to vote. That year, we registered over 300 people. Joseph Yenny became our first mayor. We got our first African-American city council person from Kenner. We also was able to get the streets paved. And of course, the reason why I got involved, we got a playground. By the time I was 10, I was a coach. I've been involved in politics ever since. My first presidential campaign in 1976, Carter Mondale. I was Jimmy Carter coordinator in Jefferson Parish, all of 16. Couldn't register because I was still underage. And of course, I worked my little you-know-what off of Jimmy Carter. And what really impressed me about Jimmy Carter was Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan was his keynote speaker. And that summer in July, I watched a convention in New York, and I said, my God, I am going to be a Democrat when I register. And I did. And I wanted to help Jimmy Carter, and I did. When Jimmy Carter won, I was promoted to being the parish coordinator for all the young people. And by the time I went to college at LSU, I was a statewide coordinator. So I've had the fever, I've had the bug for a long time. Now 7 presidential campaigns later, 56 senatorial campaigns in 28 states, 19 state and local races in over 33 states. I do believe that had all of the votes in 2000 been counted, had all of the people who stood in long lines, not just in Florida, but in Missouri, and New York, even here in Pennsylvania, had all of those people had their votes counted, and of course, those chads, the pregnant chads, the swinging chads, and my favorite, the hanging chads, had all of those chads been counted, and had the 27,000 citizens in Duval County not spoil their ballots because they were given official ballots that said, vote every page. Had the 316 people in Gadsden County who tried to cast their ballot absentee not had their ballot thrown out, had the 4,000 plus people in West Palm Beach who cast ballots for Gore and ended up for Buchanan not had their ballots confused, we would be in a different situation today. Al Gore would have been president. Now that I've gotten out my partisan gumbo, I'm going to go into my nonpartisan mumbo. And let me tell you why. I am a big advocate of civic engagement, of getting young people involved in the political process, of encouraging Americans to vote. It's a shame that in a country as prosperous as our country, in a country that spends over $2.4 trillion on all sorts of things, we somehow or another have lost interest in our own democracy. Yesterday, 77% of the eligible voters in Spain went out and cast their ballots. But in 231 days, less than 50% of the American people will take 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes out of their busy schedule to cast their ballot. Something is wrong with a democracy when people decide to opt out of the political process. The largest party today in American politics is not the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, it is the non-voting party. And we have to do something about that. This is the year that I hope the American people decide to take a larger role in their own future, to find their seats at the table, and to get involved and make a difference. This is the electoral season that we cannot afford to come up with excuses like voter registration card. I won't go out to vote. Oh, I don't know what's on the ballot, so I won't go out to vote. Well, there's no difference between the two candidates, so I won't go out to vote. Oh, well, my vote won't make a difference, so I won't get out to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, if it means giving citizens the tools they need in order process, if it means giving citizens an extra day off, a holiday, to force them to get out to vote, something must be done in this country to involve more people into our political process. Our democracy is in trouble. If our democracy was in a patient, it would be in a hospital and the ICU department with a desperate need for blood infusion. We have a problem in this country, and it's a shame that many Americans don't feel motivated enough to even learn about the issues to get involved in the political process. So tonight I'm going to talk about what I believe is the urgent need to make this electoral season a referendum on whether or not we want our democracy to continue as is, or whether or not we are going to let 10% of the American people, 10% of the highly motivated, the more partisan, polarized citizens decide our future. I come to you tonight as somebody who lives on Capitol Hill, and I tell you, if that is what we seek, that is what we're going to get, because we must give democracy a chance. Again, we need to get more citizens involved in the political process, and yes, my friends, we need more young people to get involved in the political process. I'm honored to be invited by the Frederick Douglass Institute to speak at this fine university. When you invoke the name of Frederick Douglass, I must tell you, my heart leaps with joy. When I first came to Washington, D.C. in 1998 to come back after many years of working out on campaigns, I found a house on A Street. This was no ordinary street. It was a street that once lived a great American, Frederick Douglass. Today, I'm still one of the only African Americans left on that street. And as I tell many of my friends who keep saying, why don't you move to a bigger house? Why don't you get this? I said, well, if Frederick Douglass came back and he needed some cornbread and some greens and some mashed potatoes and who knows, an apple pie, I'm probably the only person on the block that's cooking that day. Frederick Douglass himself was one of our earliest champions of bringing new people into the political process. He was a fighter. He was a visionary. And he fought great odds in order to open up the door of democracy to previously slaves in this country. After winning his own freedom, Douglass worked on behalf of other slaves, still in bondage across the country. And when slavery was finally abolished in this land, he moved on the struggle for voting rights, for not just free blacks, but for women as well. Douglass understood that we must always strive to increase the quality of our democracy. That is what he fought for. That is what he gave his life. That was his mission. And yet today, we don't believe that that is a mission that we must also have in our lives. We have a lot of work to do in our country to making our democracy more accessible to every American. I am sad to report tonight that after Congress passed the Election Reform Bill of 2002, they have failed to put money in that budget in order to clean the electoral mess left from Florida. They've ordered the computers, but they can't open them up because they don't have the software, because they didn't order the software. Did you hear about the election last week in San Diego on March 2nd? They took the machines out of the box, and they didn't know how to turn them on. And so people sat there. They showed up to vote and just looked at the machines. They say, does anyone here know how to use the machines? No one knew. In Annapolis, Maryland, they took the machines out of the box, plugged it in, and the software was missing. So they couldn't cast their ballots. They had to bring out paper all over again. And that's what has happened. We're ready to spend $1.8 billion, and I know if anybody in here is ready to go to Mars, please forgive me, but we're about to spend $1.8 billion to explore Mars. And we have not spent that amount of money to explore how we have an error-free, chat-free election. Something is wrong with our democracy in this country. The first solution is that we got to increase the number of people who get out to vote. And as an organizer, I say that with a lot of enthusiasm. When I was young, you know what? Until 1978, when I had to choose between Edwin Edwards and David Treen, I didn't really care that much about partisan politics. You know, Louisianians like their politics and their rights the same way, dirty. And so I was for the dirtiest politician. If you got in the gutter and threw mud, I was for you. That meant that you know how to cook with grease. And I was always looking for somebody who could cook with grease. But when my governor got up and said the only way he would ever lose an election if he was caught in bed with a dead girl or a live boy, I said, whoa. He's been caught with a slot machine. He's in jail now in Texas. They're trying to get him back because they say it's dry in Texas. But I made a decision at that point to support Dave Treen. At the time, Dave Treen was a Republican. And everybody said, you voting for a Republican? I'm like, yeah, but Edwin Edwards had his chance. He's been governor for 4 years. He hasn't done anything to improve education. He hasn't done anything to improve the quality of life of poor people in this state. I'm going to see what the Republican who was preaching the virtues of small business, opportunity, growth, you know, less welfare, all of this. At the time, I'm like, hey, that sounds like something okay. It's better than being caught in bed with a dead girl or a live boy. And so I want a number of people involved. And when I started going through all of the counties, from the Chafalaya Basin all the way to Calcasieu, Louisiana is a very interesting state. You spend 90% of your time on water, and then when you on land, you don't know what state you're in. And drive for hours, going to little parishes and talking to people. And people kept saying, oh, voting, that's not for me. It's for somebody else. And I kept saying, no, it's for you. I realized we had a problem. Because for years, no one taught people how to vote. And so most people were intimidated by the process. They didn't know what to do when they went out to vote. So therefore, they didn't vote. They didn't bother to vote. They didn't bother to register, and they didn't know. And I realized something that I've learned now, and again, I learned this in 2000. We have a literacy problem in this country. I've worked on campaigns where I've had to put the number, like punch 8 before it's late. You know? Vote on May 5, come alive on May 5. We used to come up with slogans just to get people excited. But I realized that I had to come up with numbers so that if I told people numbers and told them where on the ballot we needed them to vote, they're like, oh, I could do that. So our first job is to really give people the confidence they need, to remove all of the barriers to voting. You know, there's something wrong in a democracy like ours. When people go to the voting booth at 6 o'clock in the morning, they can't get in because the poll workers won't show up till 7. And there's something wrong when people stand in line because they work all day and it's 7 o'clock and they say, well, our polling place closed at 7 o'clock on the dot. Well, I just got here. I mean, can I cast my ballot? The law said you can. The law also said that if you get into a polling place and your name is not on the ballot, you can ask for provisional ballot. But most people don't know that. That's why our democracy is having trouble, because we haven't really taught people how to vote. We haven't spent any resources, unless there's leftover funds, and we all know with hard times being what they are today, there's hardly any leftover funds. And that's why Congress should fully fund our electoral system. We should have machines that give us a paper receipt. Now when you go to ATM, put it in, put it out, paper receipt. When I go in and press or put it in, I want a paper receipt. What's wrong with that? It's useful for a recount. Why not have it for our voting system? We got to make sure that in every election district across this country, the machines are working, the poll workers are trained, and that every citizen have the correct information on how to cast their ballot. The second thing is, of course, is that once we make sure all of the votes are counted, and I'm going to tell you, most people say, well, you know, that Florida mess won't happen again. You know that Florida mess has happened already again. It happened recently in Virginia. It has happened in Colorado. It's happening all over the country every time people go out to vote. It's not getting the attention of Florida. In fact, Florida wouldn't have gotten that much attention had it not been so close and had it not been the President of the United States. We've had problems with our ballot counting for years, and no one has figured out how to make our ballots a lot more accessible and a lot more user-friendly so that you know the process. There's a standard all across the board. Here's the same standard. Here's how we're going to count the votes. Here's how we're going to tally the results. Here's how we're going to announce the results. That's all you need. We don't have that in this country. and that's because Congress has failed on their job. The last thing, my friends, and not the last thing in my speech, the last thing in terms of voting, before I get into what I call civic engagement 1, and this is important. 27 million young people are eligible to vote. That's a lot of people. If I had one job in this presidential, take on the job of campaign anymore, if you know what I mean. That was a lot of headache, but it was fun, and I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't take on the job of being the communication guru, the war room guru. You know what job I would take on? I would take on the job of going out there and register young people. Do you know the biggest prize in American politics today is an increase of young people who actually get involved in the political process? The political party that is able to capture your votes, youth votes, will be the majority party in the future. That is what we must do in 2004. More young people voted for American Idol than participated in the 2000 presidential election. Something is wrong with that picture. And now, if you go on the website of Urban Outfitters, Urban Outfitter has a T-shirt, $26. And I must tell you, that's a lot of money for a T-shirt. $26 that says voting is for old people. And yet, I have heard hardly anyone say a word about how outrageous it is to discourage young people from getting involved in the political process. What if I told many under the age of 25 that by the time you get out of college, by the time you start your future, you already have a credit card payment that you owe the IRS over $32,000, and it's growing by the day. With the new deficit that has come out from the congressional budget, you are going to be in debt now for the next 12 years. In 2013 and 2012, forget Social Security. Unless they stop borrowing and stealing, robbing Peter to pay Paul, you're out of luck. Would that make you get out to vote? I don't know. Maybe we need to send everybody to Mars. Once they find the water, maybe we'll find the lost Chads, and maybe Al Gore can finally get back into the White House. Motivating people to get involved in the political process is tough. It is tough, but it's something that we must all do. I'm motivated. I don't have to spend a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror in the morning to say why I'm motivated. I know why I'm motivated. I was a little girl that grew up poor in this country. I was a little girl who wanted to do what the Bible said, to whom much is given, much is required. I wanted to give back. I was a little girl who desired to see the world and to help change the world. So I was a little girl who knew that my light could shine, but there was no way, had I gone into human resources and worked at Procter & Gamble, could my light shine the way I got involved in politics. So I'm motivated. I'm motivated. I'm motivated in the same way Prophet Amos was motivated when he said justice should roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I'm motivated because I want to see a country where all men and all women are equal. I want to see a woman in the White House. I'm motivated. I want to see an African American, Hispanic. I'm motivated. I also want to see a reduction in the budget deficit. I also like to have universal health insurance for every American. I like to see college tuition tax-free, that no one has to pay it. If you want to go, we'll pay you to go to school. I have radical ideas, some would say, but I think they're very American. I don't want to see any child grow up in poverty. I don't want to see any adult unable to go back to get their GED because they can't afford to. I would like to see a raise in the minimum wage. Get some of those corporate bums who are moving their corporations off our shores so they can avoid taxes. You know what? I want to tax them. I want them, they need to pay up, or I won't buy their products. I'll just go without Charmin. Gotta use something else for my weeping eyes. but I'm motivated. But that is the spirit that our democracy needs. We need people who are motivated. We need people who are excited about change. When the voters went out yesterday in Spain, I'm sure the Popular Party, which has been in power for such a long time, which has raised gobs of cash, I'm sure the campaign manager went to bed saying, well, you know, we had a terrorist strike on 3/11, but things have stabilized. People don't know if it's Al-Qaeda, if it's ETA. Don't worry, you know, the next 24 hours, just be calm, don't act, don't panic, don't go visit the graves, the train wreckage, just stay calm. And the opposition party, which had nothing to lose, thank you, nothing to lose, Socialist Party, center left versus center right. They went out there and they campaigned on change. They campaigned, they said, you know what? There's something wrong with our position on the war. There's something wrong with what we've done in this country. We're now the target of terrorists. And these are not homegrown terrorists. These are some other kind. They ain't the kind we know about. And they were motivated. And the prime minister-to-be went into those communities and he cried with the people. He lit candles with the people. And there was an outpouring. He motivated a country to change. When they woke up the next morning, I'm sure they're like, we won? Come again? How did we do that? How did we pull it off? They won. Because one motivated person found another motivated person who found another motivated person, and then they inspired a nation, changed the nation. Now this country is about to have a new beginning with new leadership and a new direction. It's called motivation. We have to be motivated to vote, motivated to change. If you're comfortable living in a society that is not spending money to fix our crumbling schools, if you're comfortable living in a society that refuses to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, if you're comfortable living in a society with 44 million people unemployed, if you're comfortable with your tuition going up because colleges can't meet the cost, it's all about priorities and values, then stay home. Everybody who stays home should make a statement saying, I'm staying home today because I enjoy making $5.15 an hour. Although my gas prices just shot up to $2.10, I'm comfortable with, you know, my health care premiums rising to $85 more a month. I am comfortable that I cannot afford to go out and buy my prescription medicine. I'm very comfortable because I like everything. Things are good. I'm not saying that we have to go out and tell people to vote because things are bad. I'm saying if you want to have a different type of results, you have to change the system and you have to stir the pots. We have to motivate people to get involved in the electoral process. And we all have to take our seats at the table. And don't ask what role you're going to play in this next election. Unless you're for Ralph Nader in this audience, special conversation I'd like to have with you later. You know, I've gotten over a lot. I was just about ready to call myself healed. And I was ready to say, you know, I put Florida aside. And then Katherine Harris moved around the corner from me. It was one thing having John Ashcroft as my neighbor. John Ashcroft actually lives adjacent to Frederick Douglass' home, and I keep saying his little light gonna shine at some point when he... But Katherine Harris, I'm like, oh no, God, what did I do wrong? She's following me now. And when I saw this huge truck, I said, that's the Chads. We've been missing the Chads. She's bringing Chads. But every time I think I'm healed, when I feel like I can turn a new leaf, when I can think about something else like planting in my garden or walking my little dog, here comes someone to just mess up my day. Ralph Nader messed up my day, y'all. It's horrible when you're out there having a conversation with the American people, because elections is like having a conversation. And you're having a conversation with different people in different states, different people in different communities, but pretty much you're having a conversation. Right now you're having a little argument between Bush and Kerry. It's early. I thought they would, see, George Bush would be out there saying, I've been president. If you don't like it, you don't like it. And John Kerry should, I want the job. This is a phase of the campaign, but right now they're like, you know, trying to see who can do, I mean, I've never seen anything like this. They're like really doing a little cat fight right now. I mean, the president got off the Rose Garden, and he's like, butter, mud. John Kerry like, I went to Vietnam. I can handle that. And we're sitting here like, and of course, if you're on the Bush side, with all of that money, you're like, on the Kerry side, we're like, that's what it's like. And you guys in the battleground state, y'all gonna get all of it. At least in Washington, D.C., the only time we get it when it's on CNN or one of the cable shows and somebody forgot to like switch it to another market, you know? Maybe we get the little West Virginia market, but you guys gonna get it all. And I don't know, after you get all that information, all of those ads, all of those campaigns, all of those phone calls, you mean you gonna stay home? I mean, after we gonna spend $1.4 billion to love you, to date you. One of my best focus groups was here in the state of Pennsylvania, was in a suburb in Philadelphia in 2000. And I enjoy going to focus groups. And we were having some problems getting the women to vote. Women are always the last category of people to come on. And part of the reason is that women like to deliberate. Yes, I like his hair, but I want to know where he stands on education. And they're like, what? You mean I dressed up and you just don't like me? No. Where do you stand on education? And see, women ask some real tough questions. You know, it's so interesting going into a focus group. I'm sitting there and I'm on my second Diet Coke. I'm just listening, and they're just going rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. And finally one woman said, well, you know, it all comes down to a date. I perked up. Because I'm like, date? Who dates on campaigns? And this woman said, and I can just imagine being on a date with George Bush or Al Gore. You see, Al Gore would come to my house, because he would have called my parents and made sure that I could go out with him. He'd bring a corsage and knock on the door, and I don't know. I don't think I want to go out with Al Gore. And I'm like, wow. I mean, he did everything right. He called the parents, bought a little flower, you know. I'm sure he was dressed, but the woman said she wouldn't want to go out with Al Gore. I'm like, oh. And then the woman said, but that George Bush? Yeah. He's like a cowboy. He just drive on up, blow his horn. I just walk out and don't tell my parents I'm going anywhere. She wanted George Bush because he was bomb. But you all will get that type of experience with the candidates this political season. They will date you. They're going to charm you. They're going to romance you. They're going to tell you all of this good stuff about you. Because it really is about you, by the way. It's not about them. They're just a vehicle. They're standing in for you at the White House. It's your house, by the way. You know, I went to the White House recently. Can y'all imagine? George Bush is president, commander-in-chief. I went. I won a bet. You ever had a bet with somebody who worked in the White House and they said, well, you know, if we win, you have to cook me one of those delicious Creole Cajun meals. No problem. I said, and if I win, you have to invite me to the White House, and I want to go in the dining room where the big people go. And on the day I come, you have to serve me catfish from the farm, not out the pond, not out the river, but the farm. We won. Mary Landrew. I got my little invitation from Karl Rove, sat there, and all the big people came in and out. Everybody did a double shake. What's she doing here? I'm saying, I'm just making sure the carpet's still here, the furniture's still here, because you know we'll be back in 2004. And when I finished my catfish, and I wanted some bread pudding, I said, I know y'all don't drink in the White House, put some fake bourbon on my bread pudding. I just want to smell it. Had my little bourbon on my bread pudding. I was walking out, and all of a sudden I said, wait a minute. When you visit the White House, you're supposed to leave with a souvenir, not the ashtray. I wanted some M&Ms. So, got M&Ms with George W. Bush's signature. He called while I was there. Talked to Karl Rove. He said, I'm talking to the leader of the free world. I said, who? Bill Clinton? He said, don't say that. I said, well, just tell the president I came by to get some catfish. Because we won. Again and again. And so, some M&Ms home. I couldn't leave the White House without tasting the M&Ms. So I broke open a little box. I was going to send the other couple boxes home to my little nieces and nephews because I figured they would get a kick out of having some M&Ms with George W. Bush signature. I have Bill Clinton's signature, so you know I'm okay. And lo and behold, I looked at the M&Ms and I'm like, Carl, what's up with these M&Ms? He said, what's wrong with them? I said, whatever happened to the little brown one? Whatever happened to the little yellow one? All the little tasty dark chocolate ones, they were gone. It was red, white, and blue. It's not just red, white, and blue. It's brown, it's yellow, it's orange. It's the colors of all of the people of this country. You can't take them out of the little M&M box. I gave my M&Ms back. I said, when you put the little brown ones back, and the little yellow ones in, I'll come back and get my M&Ms. But in 2004, we'll get our own M&Ms. Don't worry. Well, relationship with a lot of Republicans in Washington, D.C., because we do care about making sure that we have an error-free election, and that we are going to work very hard to ensure that every vote is counted this time. We're going to try to eliminate all of the intimidation that takes place 3-4 weeks before the election. Everybody who's qualified to vote and is on the voter registration rolls 6 months before the election will stay on the voter registration roll. We haven't signed an agreement. We haven't signed a pledge. Maybe it's just a gentle person's handshake that we're doing right now, but we're talking to each other, because both political parties have a lot at stake in this electoral season, not just the presidency of the United States, but the control of the Congress of the United States. That matters to all of us in politics. It matters to all of us in public service. Look, I would like first grade in this country once again have a citizenship class where they spend the first 3 or 4 years of their formal schooling learning what it means to be an American citizen. To be an American citizen is to be the most important citizen in this world, in the sense that we are a superpower. Not just our country, but the world we live in. How are we going to lead this planet that we live on? Our students should know what it means to be a good citizen. They should know what it means to be a great public servant. And to all of the young people that volunteer in high school and junior high school to work at hospitals and nursing homes and homeless shelters, we should not just give them extra credit for doing that. We should give them extra credit for going to the polls on election day. I call it youth at the booth. It's time that we give young people a form. Allow them to become election judges. Allow them to become election monitors, election observers. Go into a voting booth, they could get the machines working. They know more about gadgets and technology than I would ever learn. Hours when I went back to my computer, I had Barbie, I had all these Rugrats, I had so many games on my computer, and I never knew how to load software. Perhaps if we let them get to the polls, they not only know how to take it out of the box, they know how to boot it up, and they know how to load that software. It's time that we give young people a formal role, a very substantive role in helping to improve our democracy. We must educate every citizen about their rights. We cannot allow citizens, again, to do what happened in Florida. That is, to go and cast ballots for someone they have no intentions of voting for. When I talk to many of the people involved in our South Florida operation, especially in the Jewish community, they said, "Can you believe it? I voted for Pat Buchanan." I say, I'm Catholic. I know there's a penance for that. Next time you'll have to vote twice. But we really need to ensure that our citizens know the ballot design and that there's no confusion. There are some ballots that are written and put together that, my God, you need more than just a high school diploma or a college degree to figure out the ballot. We need to simplify our ballots, make it so that people can go in there and just do their thing and get out. I love the ballots that I see in South Africa where Nelson Mandela picture appeared right next to his name and right next to an X. And people understood that they wanted Nelson Mandela because they saw his picture, they read his name, and they just went ahead and penciled in the X. We need simple ballots, a simple process, so that we can find ways to increase the number of people in our democracy. Just like Frederick Douglass, who understood this in 1865, when he stood before an entirely white audience in Massachusetts to justify his support for expanding voting rights, he said, "I am for the immediate, unconditional, and universal enfranchisement of every black man in every state of the Union." He said, without this, his liberty is a mockery. Without this, you might as well almost retain the old name of slavery for his condition. For in fact, if he is not the slave of the individual master, he is the slave of society and holds his liberty as a privilege, not as a right. He is at the mercy of the mob and has no means of protecting himself. Now that all Americans have the right to vote, we must continue to build on Douglas' legacy and increase the diversity and inclusiveness of our society and bringing more people into the political process. I hope you all join me in the pursuit of civic engagement, civic activity, voter mobilization, voter motivation, and to get citizens out there in large numbers. One last thing. Frederick Douglass once said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. I believe this electoral season, we cannot just sit back and criticize the people who've decided to put their names in to run for office. We have to become active participants. And some of you in this room, decision in your life. And I think in local races across this country, Democrats finding people to run for political office. You all might say, how could that be? We have a long list of Strom Thurmonds who are applying. Well, my friend is gone. We need replacements. We need more people to run for political office and to feed the pipeline and to begin to make their statement and their stand in American politics. There's an old scripture that my grandmother taught me when I was a little girl growing up that encouraged me along my way, and so I'll tell you this scripture and then I'll take your questions and comments, and if anybody have any recipe for victory, I'll take that as well. But the scripture was found in Galatians 6:9. Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up. When I think back on the history of our struggle in this country to bring people in, Frederick Douglass, Anthony, Ida B. Wells, so many people had to work, open doors for each and every one of us to participate. Once upon a time, unless you own property in this country, you couldn't exercise your right to vote. We all were excluded from the political process until 83 years ago. And for African Americans and other minorities, it's been a very difficult struggle to get the door of political participation. Your help to not only keep the doors open season with people ballot and to give our country a whole new season of new political activity. I can't wait to see the 109th Congress. I hope we bring men and women of goodwill, of good faith, people who will want to change society, not just to explore Mars and to have programs that find things that we don't need any longer. I want people who will come in there and really hunker down and work together with civility and respect of one another to make a difference in the lives of all of our people. So I thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions. I know you all have some great questions about the 2000 campaign, and I left some of that off my statement because I like to always do that in the Q&A phase. And yes, if you want to know a little bit more about what Al Gore is going to do in the future now that his main man, Howard Dean, is no longer a candidate, I'll try to answer that as well. Thank you so much, and let's open it up for questions and dialogue. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And if it's halftime, anyone knows the score? Now I'm vested in the Lady Vulcans. Question?
If you have any questions, you could come on this side.
Yes, sir.
You spoke of radical reform, such as not allowing companies to go across seas and so on. What politician would make laws like that and help change society for the better, in your mind?
Well, I do believe that there are a number of politicians, including Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, who's not only fighting on outsourcing, but he's also fighting on the whole overtime rule. I don't know if you've also heard that there's a proposal now to eliminate overtime for several different professions. If you're a policeman, a firefighter, a nurse, you may no longer qualify for overtime, even in cases of emergency. So I do believe that there's legislation now on outsourcing. Tom Daschler has sponsored this legislation. Partisan legislation. There are Republicans, including the senator here, who's helping us on overtime, and on, that's Arlen Specter, by the way. He is also helping on the overtime rule and also on outsourcing.
Okay.
Good evening. Can you
evening,
tell
sir.
us where the Electoral College came from and why we're the only country that uses it? Because I think this, from my mind, this administration has figured out how to fix it. That's what I think of the 2000 election, and I truly think it's going to happen again. I don't think that President Bush is going to win, but I don't see how he's going to lose.
Well, let me just say this. The Electoral College is as old as our democracy. It's been around for over 200 years. There have been problems with it, of course, on several different occasions. The election of 1812, the election of 1876, and now the election of 2000. So it needs a little bit of tweaking and adjusting in terms of our, what I call our ability to count votes, standards of who's registered, who's able to participate, and how those votes are counted. Now, when it comes to winning this year, I do believe that if John Kerry, selects a good person who can add a state to his, let me just say this. So let me just give you my advice. John Kerry is going to have to bring someone who can help him win a state, especially a state that right now is not in the Democratic column. So perhaps you bring in John Edwards, who could help you win North Carolina. You bring in a Dick Gephardt, who can win Missouri. You bring in a Bob Graham or Bill Nelson, who can help you win Florida. You bring in Janice Napolitano, who will help you win Arizona. Bill Richardson is selected by not just Hispanics, but New Mexico. So Democrats can win, but we cannot win by ignoring Ohio. We pulled out of Ohio almost 2 months before the election because we didn't have enough resources in 2000. Ohio should be a Democratic state. Tennessee should have stayed Democratic. Arkansas should have been winnable. I do believe Louisiana Rush Limbaugh, Matt Drudge, and have the same type of impact. Look, I that Republicans and their allies have on the battlefield. Say it again today. I'm not going to attack it because campaign spent 5 weeks after the nomination fighting Gonzalez and Bill Clinton, Republican. That's a recipe for disaster. When Al Gore looks at the poll and says, I'm doing well in Tennessee, and therefore I don't have to campaign here until 2 weeks out, that's a recipe for disaster. So, you know, I have beaten Republicans and Republicans with money that you can't even deal with. In Louisiana, Mary Landrieu had to go up against $22 million. We had less than 4. Every conservative, every country, every religious station was anti-Mary Landrieu. And we won by going to the people. They were talking about the right to life, and we talked about the quality of life. They were talking about marry, adopt children, and we're feed and educate and give every child health care. If you know how to talk to voters, they can buy.
Lot about voters, but what about parties? I mean, it's interesting how the media discouraged, for example, Ralph Nader from running, but in a way, is that not a form of civic engagement itself? And if there were several other parties, might not indeed encourage more involvement? Perhaps many people because of that.
Well, if by my watch in 2000, there were 18 different presidential candidates running on 12 different parties. We have libertarians, green, independents, we have a communists, socialists. So we have a lot of political parties. People must make a decision in a democracy whether or not they wish to be a Democrat, Republican, or other. In the District of Columbia, we have a statehood party because we lack vote and representation. And so that's another vehicle for people to get in. Look, I don't care what car you ride in as long as you're heading to the voting booth. That matters to me. Now, Ralph Nader, I'm sorry. You know, Louisianans, when we go to the zoo, most people look at the species, we look at the recipe. I'm going to make a recipe out of Ralph Nader one day. And let me tell you why. And I'll tell you why, because, and this is someone who respects, you know, Ralph Nader as a consumer advocate. I mean, we all are safer because of Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader has been a great leader on many issues in our time. But in 2000, he went into battleground states, and said there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats on boom, 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 okay? They both, you know, are sipping from the same corporate straw. Now, in 2000, the stakes were very high, including the Supreme Court, you name it. Pat Buchanan, who was running, did not go into battleground states and try to disrupt George Bush's love affair with voters in those states. Ralph Nader only campaigned against us, not against the Republican, and then he took Republican money. The Republican Leadership Council did ads, and he never once condemned those ads. They flushed him so that he can go after us. And so I said to my people in August of 2000, I said, if Ralph wants to debate, let's debate him. Let's have Gloria Steinem and Paul Wellstone and Barney Franks and Jesse Jackson and every other progressive in this country debate him. And let's take him on, and let's make sure that he does not have an impact in those battleground states. 5%, I can give you some states that go and get 5%. In fact, I have friends in Alabama who would vote for him. I have friends in Mississippi who would vote for him. I have friends in Texas who would vote for him. But, you know, in terms of the battleground, nah, this is a battle. And let me just say this. For 3 years, I've not seen Ralph Nader use any of his political capital to condemn this administration's position on global warming, this administration's position on outsourcing of jobs, this administration's position on corporate, you know, coziness. He's not been in the debate for 3 years, and all.
Well,
Yes, sir.
I was going to ask about Ralph Nader, but I think we know how you feel about that. My other question, as you mentioned earlier, the Republican Party has an agenda and they're well organized. Wouldn't you say that that's kind of what the Democrats' disadvantage is that Democrats in general cover a much broader range of views? Like, for example, we had 10 candidates running for president in the primaries, I mean, fighting on various issues, fighting each other, whereas Republicans tend to fall in line and stick by one guy. If the Democrats adopted that view, wouldn't we have a better shot of winning more often, or a better shot of winning at all?
Well, look, in 2000, George Bush had, 11 different competitors? People forget that Dan Quayle ran, Elizabeth Dole, Gary Barr, you know, Orrin Hatch, Alan Keyes. Of course, everyone recalls John McCain, Robert Smith, the senator from New Hampshire. He had a lot of people in the process, but day by day, primary, he got rid of them. Same thing happened in our process. I think our process has worked. The Democrats are back on their game. It worked for the Republicans in 2000. We were hoping that it would work for Democrats in 2004. I mean, we've had a long political season. Voters have been on a shopping spree. And John Kerry has emerged as the chef. So it's time that he stirs the pot. He has to enlarge his base. He has to define himself before his opponent define him. And he has to campaign aggressively because he's the challenger. And he has to put the incumbent on the defensive. He shouldn't be on the defensive. He must put the incumbent on the defensive. He must spend every day of his life asking George Bush, where is Osama? Where is Mullah Omar? What happened to the budget surplus? Okay? He has to put George Bush on the defensive. Otherwise, George Bush, I'm telling you, he's going to campaign as the man of the people. Compassionate conservative, uniter, not the divider. The person who changed the tone in Washington, D.C. just got eliminated all the Democrats. Tone's okay now. I'm making fun of my Republican opponents, but you all know that this is all is fair and love is war. Yes, ma'am.
Donna, we all know that in 2007, the Voters Voting Rights Act is coming to fruition. 2005, January the 21st, day after the president takes office, they're going to start pounding on the 2007 Voting Rights Act. What is your position, or what is your organization's position on the 2007 Voting Rights Act?
My position today is that as long as we have a Justice Department that's not enforcing the Voting Rights Act, we need Congress to strengthen it and to expand it. The Voting Rights Act itself is not in jeopardy. It's a provision of the Voting Rights Act that is set to expire. I do believe that Congress will renew that the same way they renewed the Civil Rights Act in 1991 with a Republican president, George Herbert Walker Bush, and regardless of who wins in 2000 and this 2004, we will have that provision of the voting rights extended.
Why can't we have it a law as opposed to an act?
Well, look, you know, the 15th Amendment supposedly guarantee our right to vote as a country, but we all know that that amendment is basically toothless unless we have provisions inside our government that allows people to cast their ballots. In 2000, there were many violations of the Voting Rights Act, and we had to not just, you know, get tape recorders and pencil and paper, but also photographs and go around and talk to people about the various violations of the Voting Rights Act. And we're still, to this day, embroiled in legal suits over what happened in 2000. But I am on it, we're on it, and I hope the country is on it. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
First of all, John Kerry should pick you for vice president.
Oh, thank you, sir. You're so kind. You know, that's called a kosher Cajun connection. I don't know if he can handle that. My views, unlike politicians who give you 3 answers for 1 question, I don't know, man. I'm just, you know, one of those kind of women.
My question is, I see that you're for universal health care, college
Yes.
tuition. Do you think the Democratic Party has moved too far to the center and maybe alienated its base?
I think the Democratic Party had to move in the Senate in the 1990s in order to reestablish itself as a national party of mainstream values, a party that cared about, not just working families, but having solutions to help all families in this country. In 2004, you're not going to see a lot of center politics. You're going to see a lot of base politics on both the right as well as the left. This is a turnout election. This is about the partisan divide in our country. Our country very evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats and independents who are actually now showing a preference for either side. So, no, it's about the base. And although I think that John Kerry has to campaign in the mainstream, let me just put a little, there's a commercial out now that John Kerry is the most liberal member in the Senate. And I'm like, how could that be? The man hasn't been around long enough to, to cast all of those votes. Well, I took a look at his votes in the National Journal. John Kerry voted against Charles Pickering. John Kerry voted against all of the Bush judges. John Kerry voted against the Bush administration attempt to repeal overtime pay. John Kerry voted for extension of unemployment benefits for people who've lost their job under this president. If that makes you a liberal, then I'm comfortable with having a liberal president.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, I've heard a lot of talk about voter registration, getting out the vote, telling people who to vote for, telling people how to vote, getting people allied along political lines. I'm personally, independent right now. I view one of the bigger issues not being so much people aren't registered to vote, as people are too apathetic to even care about the issues. And if you don't care, why vote? I mean, I'm seeing people who are illiterate. I'm seeing people who, like you said, will vote for George Bush just because he looks like the kind of guy that'll ride up on a Mustang and show you a good time. I think education and actual thinking about leadership and the sociology of the country, et cetera, should be deciding factors of campaigns more than just people saying, ooh, he looks good, or, well, the nice person who brought me a pie said I should vote for this candidate.
Right.
I'm just wondering your views on actual, more than voter registration, voter information, actually trying to combat apathy and getting people interested in learning about the seriousness of the political discussion that's happening, rather than just turning out larger numbers of votes for the most charismatic person to get the job.
Well, unfortunately, in our democracy, we have pretty much left what you just described, giving voters information, providing them with tools. We've pretty much left that up to the two parties, the two major political parties. And often they look at their budget and they say, well, I'm only going to spend, 1 cent on really telling voters what's at stake, because we don't want to talk to a lot of people. We only want to talk to those people who want to vote for us. So we don't have a separate pool of resources for our schools, for our universities, unless, we get money from foundations and others to really put together democracy projects. What California State University is involved in, a democracy project. We need more of that. We need to teach Democracy 101 from the time a child is in first grade to the time the child leaves 12th grade and beyond. That is our obligation as a free society and as the world's superpower. But we don't believe in that. We need early civic engagement, early civic activity. We have to start at the grade school level, because by the time a child gets through high school, and if you haven't already, exposed them to voting and the political process, it's not on the list of top 10. Top 10 is a Calvin, Guess, jeans, and then tennis shoes. I'm not trivializing young people. I'm just saying that this is a group of people that spend more than $74 billion a year on shoes, on how they look, but not how they think. And so we have to turn it around. The only way to do it is getting people involved early. When I was in 5th grade, I was actually Miss Ohio, the Buckeye State. I know. I mean, being from Louisiana was a big deal. I knew all about Lewis and Clark. I knew all about the history of Ohio. I couldn't wait to go to Mr. Marchand class. Every day there was something different, something exciting about the country, about learning about the political process. And, people felt, at least in my school, we all had roles to play. We thought that this was our country. I went to Girl State when I was 16, and I actually ran for fire chief, and I made it, and I was so excited. I'm like, well, maybe I should run for attorney general. I I was always obsessed with put people in jail. And I did, and I won. But we had programs like that in public schools that encourage young people who are inclined to get involved in the political process to know as much as they know. That's the way we do it. But again, Congress will not approve the money. We barely have enough money for teachers to do the job they need to do. Most of my friends who are teachers have to spend $200, $300 a month out of their own pocket to just even have chalk. So if we don't have money for our teachers to do their jobs, how can we have programs like this? Look, we're going to have to go to our nonprofit organizations, to come to colleges and universities, and we're going to have to ask our two parties to invest more resources and giving citizens more information, more forums, more time on C-SPAN. Why don't we allow politicians to advertise free, charge a hefty price, so that we get the views of everybody? I'll even take the views of the independents and the Green Party if everybody can get on TV and give their views. But our democracy, as I said, if it was a patient, it would be in the critical care unit, because we're not spending any money on making this the best democracy in the world.
My question basically has to do with the healthcare issue and with disabilities. There isn't much of the issue of disabilities ever brought up in a campaign. And so my question is this: where does Kerry and the Democratic Party stand on the stem cell research issue? We all know where Bush stands on it. I mean, there's over 11 million people on disability that would like to go out and work, that would like to support their family. And when Bush didn't give his approval to the stem cell research, that really dashed a lot of hopes of people being able to possibly get off disability, back into society, and actually being productive.
Well, the Democratic platform is in the process of being drafted, and I'm sure we will have a plank on that issue. I know where I stand. I don't know where Senator Kerry stands on that issue, but I do believe that many Democrats did support the legislation that would provide the funding and research for more, stem cells to be used for medical purposes. Of course, we got embroiled in a whole debate about whether or not it was, taking the life of someone else and all of the other bioethical issues. But I think it's important that we have that in the platform, that we address it, because it has been a major public policy issue. And you're right, that would also help to clearly distinguish John Kerry from George Bush. And he can challenge him on some of the latest research that has been found to help cure people with Alzheimer's and many other multiple sclerosis. I had a friend who had to go to Europe in order to get stem cell help. So we should find ways to make that a part of our health care agenda. And I will remind Senator Kerry and his staff that you raised it. If you give me your name and your email, I might even get somebody to send you a letter.
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In a recent issue of The Nation, there was an article about the newly established Center for American Progress.
Yes.
And you were quoted, and please forgive me if I paraphrase you wrong, that you're for it, but that it's simply Democrats rehashing old ideas, not coming up with any new ones, and that Democrats don't need people writing 15-page papers. They need people writing one-word answers, like Newt Gingrich's Plan for America, or Contract with America, I'm
Contract.
sorry. My question is, how do you justify like a one-page answer to, a simple answer to complex issues, complex problems?
Well, that's why you have legislation, because you can write a piece of legislation for 200-300 pages. The recent Medicare bill was over 1,600 pages. So if you want to know how to lower the price of prescription drugs, I'll give you all 1,600 pages of it. However, if the principle that you value is that seniors should not have to pay these exorbitant costs for prescription drugs, they can go to Canada and get Viax for less than 50 cents a pill, and here in America it's $3. Something wrong with that. I mean, you can put that in a one-page policy paper. Look, what Democrats are now engaged in is what I call tit for tat with Republicans, because Republicans have such an advantage. Got Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, all these other, Manhattan Institute, AEI, American Enterprise Institute. They have a lot of research think tanks. And on the left, Democrats felt that we need to create our own think tank. My concern, and you go on the website. I went on the website yesterday. Yesterday, I was writing my column, and I wanted to figure out John Kerry's plan on terrorism. I didn't see anything. So I found this speech that he gave in Los Angeles, wasn't enough. This is the one-year anniversary of our invasion of Iraq, and I thought I should know a little bit more about what John Kerry plans to do to keep us safe and secure. I live 8 blocks from the Capitol. I want to really stay safe and secure, just like you all here in Pennsylvania would like to stay safe and secure. It took me almost 30 minutes of research to find out the Democratic position on various issues surrounding, the 1-year anniversary of Iraq, the war on terrorism, homeland security. Now, if I was a member of the opposite party, I'd go on one website, got it all downloaded. So what I'm saying is that we need resources like the Center for American Progress to house all of these ideas, but it should be ideas. It shouldn't be just a regurgitation of old news. I don't want to see old news. I mean, half the time they send me, Vice President Cheney and Halliburton. I get that 3 days a week. I don't want to, I'm not into Halliburton, and I'm not into Dick Cheney. I want to know, how do we improve our defense system? I've been trying to have a conversation, I don't know about you all, but our defense budget just rose from $254 billion a year to over $430 billion. Now, are we paying for what I call Cold War weapon systems? Or are we paying for new technology to help us win the war on terror? That's the new war. The Soviet Union is, okay? With the exception of North Korea, what are we spending all of this money on? We know we're not spending on our troops. Half the troops over there don't even have all of the flak jackets and the materials they need. So I did a whole detailed analysis of the defense budget because I worked on Capitol Hill, and I called my old boss and basically said, can I get a copy of the bill? And it took me 3 hours to go through the bill. And I'm like, whoa, how come we're not going through this bill? We're paying for weapon systems that no longer exist. We're paying more money to keep some fleets of helicopters going, and those helicopters can't even leave the ground that they're on. Because just putting a new screw in or giving it a tune-up would cost more than $60,000. And that's without the mechanic. That's just the supplies. So I went through the defense budget, but I couldn't go on one liberal website or one progressive website outside of, let's create the Department of Peace, which I would love too, along with wine and roses every day of my life. But we don't have a website like that really critically analyze all of these positions so that we can go out there and articulate a different vision of the country. And I'm telling you, I'm a liberal Hulk. I'm a liberal Hulk. I'm a liberal that support America having a strong defense. That's part of having a secure country. However, I don't believe in order to defend our country, we need to spend $400 billion. We can get by on spending less and have a far more superior military, a far more superior intelligence apparatus if we put money where we needed money. We still have a CIA with less than 10% of the people in the whatever you call the spies. There's a formal name what you call, I call them spies. Less than 10%, they don't even speak Arabic. What's wrong with that? How come we're not giving colleges a couple extra dollars? Can I give you a scholarship? You can study art and history, but I need you to study Arabic also. We're not even doing that. So how are we going to win the war on terrorism when we're not even speaking the language? We don't understand the culture. So that's a long answer. See, that's why I can't run from that. I don't even give 10 seconds answers, my folks.
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
What I wanted to ask you was, I could somewhat understand, even though I was a little surprised, having spent a lot of time in politics, that Al Gore and Ann Richards would come out and endorse someone, so early in the race. But now that Howard Dean is out of the race, what can they do and what can John Kerry do to try and bring just our own party back into line, let alone, the independents and the youth vote that I know we're looking for and that I know we're working for? What can they do to try and bring those people into line so that, we can at least try and have a victory this year?
Thank you so much. That's a good question. First of all, I hope John Kerry continues to reach out and unify the party. Wesley Clark is campaigning for him tomorrow in Ohio, I believe. Howard Dean is going to announce his new PAC. Dick Gephardt has campaigned almost nonstop. John Edwards has agreed to campaign. Bob Graham has agreed. Carol Moseley Braun. Big Al came on board today. Sharpton, that is. He has the best hair still in the whole process. Al Sharpton woke me up this morning and told me that he was going to meet with John Kerry, and I gave him some notes of what he should ask for. So interesting talking to, someone who's so close to the Lord. And so I think Kerry is bringing people together. Look, Al Gore and John Kerry, like Al Gore and Bill Clinton, need to sit down and break a little bread, but I think they will break that bread, and Aaron Richards, of course, will be out there campaigning nonstop for John Kerry. Look, Howard Dean was, for a while, he wooed me. I ain't gonna lie. I may have voted for him. I voted twice this year. They were both legal. One counted, one didn't. And I gave Howard one of my votes. And I gave it to him because I said, Howard gave the Democratic Party back his backbone. Howard said, stand up. And if you disagree, say you disagree. And when he woke up that morning and said that he represented, like Paul Wellstone, the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, it excited me. So thank God for Howard Dean. Thank God for all of the new people. And I know John Kerry will bring all of the family back together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
From a political commentary standpoint, do you think that there is any way that Kerry will be able to possibly change the No Child Left Behind Act to just basically make it better for whenever he may or may not be able to get into office?
Let me tell you. Last week, the Associated Press reported from a congressional budget analyst that over $30 billion in unfunded mandates will be passed on to the states. Of that 30, is actually 29.8. Of that $30 billion, 9.6 is in special education, and $10 million is in No Child Left Behind. I mean, you cannot ask the state, you cannot ask the teachers to teach and to test and to hold people accountability and not give them the resources, not give them the new tools they need, not give them the information they need in order for them to ensure our students are learning. So, yes, John Kerry, I believe, will have to find $10 to $20 billion in order for these states to, meet the criteria of the law. Some states like Utah and Virginia have already voted at the state level to ask the federal government to rescind it because they cannot afford it. They just cannot afford to do what's required in order to meet the standards. They're saying, yes, we want to have, qualified students. Yes, we would like to have these different barriers and accountability, but they don't have the resources. So it's a question of resources. Again, it's a question of priority. $2.4 trillion. Now, when I left Capitol Hill, we were just reaching $1 trillion. So we've grown the economy and grown the budget by $1 trillion in the last 5 years. I mean, if we cannot find the money to educate our citizens and to make sure that we have the best trained workforce in the world, then I don't know how we're going to keep our competitive edge in the 21st century. This would be a priority if I was president of the United States. No child would be left behind, and I mean no child would be left behind, and no school would be left behind, and no teachers would be caught teaching without the resources they need, including their own salary. So I would make this a priority, and I would fight for it, and I would tell them, I would level with the American people, every school deserves equal funding. 50 years after Brown v. Board of Education, we should no longer leave some schools behind, and other schools continue to thrive and get ahead.
And
thank you.
Just sort of piggyback off of that, is there any kind of more federal funding towards the benefit of after-school programs, as far as music, as far as actually the young Republicans and young Democrats that they're actually starting up in high school?
Discretionary funding has been cut across the board. In this new budget that's still working its way through Congress, there's a lot of programs that's on the chopping block, and I'm sorry to say a lot of after-school program, a lot of discretionary stuff has been severely cut. Again, the devil's in the detail, and Satan's been busy in Washington, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Patricia Milford. And you mentioned the ballots in South Africa. A year and a half ago, I was monitoring the elections in Jamaica. And they have paper ballots with, you know, little pictures and the name, and so that it was clear to the people who are voting how they have to vote. I understand that in Canada, they also use a paper system where they just put an X in an appropriate place. Why is the United States government insisting that we use technology that isn't even proven when people can read and write sufficient?
It was not just Florida, it was in Chicago and all across. I mean, the punch ballot technology created chads. And the reason why they got rid of those antiquated vote machines is because they didn't keep the machines up. They didn't, you know, from time to time in between elections, you know those old typewriters, you have to take out some 3-in-1. I know I'm talking about my age. You all probably just spray things now with WD. But they didn't really grease it, and so the machines didn't work. And so therefore, they say we need new technology, better technology. We have new technology, but we have not put in place a security system. We've not put in place a training mechanism. We have not put in place any type of accountability with those new machines. So we have new machines, but the old, not age-wise, but the old technology, the old folks who've been using the machines that don't know how to use them.
Well, my question is, why don't we go back to the most simple way, like
run for office, change the system. I'm sorry. The only reason why I'm telling you this is because this has been a long fight, a long struggle to improve the voting systems in our country, and we still haven't gotten it right.
No.
Nope. We're still like a third world country. I see that my time is up, and let me just say, I have to, you know, Brazils, you know, they named us after a country. Everyone else wanted to be named after a color when slavery was over. And my family said, we want to go to Brazil, and that's why my last name is Brazile. But Martin Luther King honorees are about to be announced, and I understand that this is a great prize for some essay writers in this room. And let me say to all of you who participated in that essay contest, you are all winners. When you chose to write an essay about Martin Luther King, you chose to write an essay about a man who changed America. So thank you all for having me, and congratulations to the winners. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse Harita, your student trustee and the president of the Student Association here at Cal. I've been asked to say a few short words of gratitude to Mrs. Brazile for her presentation here this evening. Most importantly, I want to thank her for taking time out of her very busy schedule to visit us here in Cal, a place that's not necessarily also welcome often to a lot of democratic type things. We don't have a lot of these things around here. That being said, I'd like to clap. This summer, I had a great opportunity to listen to Ms. Brazile at our Campaigns and Elections Conference in DC, where her expertise, her energy, and her humor, as I'm sure you found here this evening, filled the room with a lot of light and a lot of candor. Tonight was no different. Well, maybe a little more. She did make us laugh a little more here tonight, I think. As a political science major, and yes, a Republican, I've learned a great deal here this evening. Thank you for your candor, and thank you for your shared experiences with us here this evening. It's been an honor to host you here at Cal. I'd like to introduce Chris Bradley, who's the president of the BSU, to make a presentation to Ms. Brazile.
Thank you. As Jesse has stated, my name is Chris Bradley, and I'm the president of the Black Student Union here at California University of Pennsylvania. And on behalf of the California University community, we'd like to present this to Ms. Brazile for a job well done.
Thank you. See, this is why I'm a woman of faith. I didn't get anything on Valentine's Day, but the Lord said, just hold on. And here it is a month later, I got my Valentine. Thank you so much. Thank you, brother.